Have you guys ever seen those crochet tutorials and pattern videos where it honestly all sounds like a bunch of random words? Like you're trying to learn how to crochet for the first time, but it sounds like you're listening to a whole new language. I'm not gonna lie, I myself have created tutorials and patterns that are a little bit overwhelming and difficult for beginners to understand. So I created this video specifically for beginners as like a basic introduction that you can go back to anytime you encounter a stitch or a pattern that you're unfamiliar with. I'll be covering different materials that you might need, such as stitch markers, needles, hooks, yarn, scissors, and also when you're going to need them. I'm going to go over different types of yarn and hook sizes and how they relate to each other. I'm also going to go over techniques such as magic circles, fastening off, weaving in your ends, color changing, starting a new row, etc. Lastly, I'm going to go over common stitches such as chains, single crochets, double crochets, half double crochets, increases and decreases. And I'm going to do this part really slowly so that you can follow along much easier. And this entire video will be separated into parts or chapters so that it's easy for you to go back to a specific part that you need. Anyway, let's get started. Okay, so for this part, I'll be going over the basic materials. So number one, we have yarn. So these are just some examples of yarn. We'll be going over the different types and sizes later, but this is just an example. Now you can buy yarn from different websites, and also it's different for every country, different local stores, but typically in most craft and fabric stores, you'll be able to find yarn. In my case, I buy them from Michaels. I'm from Canada, but Walmart also has some pretty affordable ones. They have a good selection as well. I've also purchased from Hobbii online, and Amazon also has some. Number two is hooks. So these are what they look like. There are some really great affordable ones on Amazon. They have them in kits most of the time where there's needles, hooks, measuring tapes, and stitch markers in them as well. I definitely suggest ergonomic ones like this where the base is a lot wider and softer. It just helps you to crochet for longer. Next is needle, but this is not just any kind of needle. It has to be a needle with a wider hole, as you can see right there. Mine is actually a little bit tilted, so it's easier to insert it into my projects. And you're going to need it for fastening off ends and weaving in ends. Next, we have scissors. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory for cutting yarn. And then lastly, we have stitch markers. So this is what they look like. They kind of look like paper clips. So basically, this is used for when you need to count stitches or when you need to keep track of where you should start or end a row. Basically, you just slip this inside of a stitch and then you just close it like a safety pin. I wouldn't say that it's a must because I've used other things such as bobby pins or even yarn scraps just to keep track of what I want my stitch to be. So it's probably very overwhelming going into a yarn store, especially when there's so many different brands, yarn types, textures, materials that you're probably unfamiliar with. But I'm here to help you make your experience much less stressful the next time you go. Basically, depending on your project, specific types of yarn will be more compatible. But at the end of the day, most people will just use whatever yarn is at their disposal, and that's perfectly fine. You do you choose the yarn for your project, but this is just a basic guide of what crocheters normally use for what. So the first yarn I will be going through is the most versatile and affordable option, which is acrylic yarn. So this is an example of what it looks like. The most common size, so it says size 4 medium, and even shows you the crochet hook size, which is 5.5 millimeters, that is most compatible with this type of yarn. And you can also see, if you're unsure of what material it is acrylic. Specifically 100% acrylic right there. So everything is on the label. You have all the information that you need. Acrylic yarn is pretty much compatible with most projects that you want to make. This ranges from keychains to plushies to accessories and even clothing items. It does have great insulation, so if you want to make beanies, mitts, scarves, those would be perfect to keep you warm. However, because they keep you warm, I would advise not using this for summer tops because you will just bake. Now, the reason I combined hook sizes and yarn sizes in this same section is because, as you can see, the label not only shows you what hook you should be using, but essentially the thicker the yarn strand, the bigger your hook. So as you saw earlier, 5.5 would be perfect for that specific yarn. But if you want to make your project smaller or bigger, you could just adjust your hook size accordingly. Now, the smaller your hook, so I would say anything that's this small, you could see how much smaller they are. This is a size 2.0 millimeter and a 3.5 millimeter. The smaller it is, the less gaps you'll see in your work. Picking a smaller hook is great for making plushies so that the stuffing has less chance of coming through the stitches. It also makes for a sturdier, stiffer project. So using a smaller hook means that it'll take longer for you to finish your project, or it's going to look much smaller than you had anticipated because the stitches are closer together. Now, the bigger your hook, the more gaps you'll see between the stitches, but it also makes for a softer, more flowy finished work. This is typically compatible for clothing items such as tops, scarves, or beanies. Now, the next type of yarn is cotton yarn, and it's quite similar to the acrylic because the ones I've encountered are normally about the same size as the acrylic or smaller. This is the one that I have. I bought this from Hobby Yarn during their Black Friday sale. As you can see, they pack them in much smaller skeins, and it looks different from the acrylic because I don't know if you can tell, but for each thread and every single strand, it's much easier for me to see that. So while you're working, there's a chance of it unraveling as well. But this is a really good quality yarn that is great for most of your projects, like I said, but it doesn't retain as much heat as acrylic yarn does, so it's perfect for those summer tops that you want to make. And this is also very highly absorbent, so if you want to make coasters or kitchen cloths or hand towels, this is a perfect yarn to use for that. This yarn also doesn't stretch as much as acrylic yarn does, so a lot of crochet artists actually prefer using this for accessories and keychains because it retains the shape so much better. In my personal opinion, however, it's harder for me to find cotton yarn that is more readily available and more affordable. That's why I often just stick to acrylic yarn. It also takes longer for me to finish a project with cotton yarn because it's sometimes a little bit smaller. Now, the next type of yarn is wool. These are just some examples. They're definitely fuzzier, and as you can probably assume, this is mostly used for warmer clothing items such as beanies, mitts, and scarves. And they're typically combined with other materials such as acrylic. So you would often see like 80% acrylic, 20% wool. And this is probably because wool is very expensive. So yeah, this is definitely on the pricier side, but it has a really soft texture and it'll definitely keep you warm. Now, the last type of yarn I'm going to cover is the chenille or blanket yarn. So basically, this is a very big but very soft yarn that is mostly used for plushies. Now, these are commonly size super bulky 6 or higher, and as you can see, it requires an 8mm hook. I wouldn't use an 8mm hook if I was making a plushie because I want the stitches to be closer together, so I typically use 5mm to 6.5mm. These are great for larger projects such as plushies, blankets, and even bags. They are very soft and very satisfying to work with because of the texture, so I love using this yarn. So for this section, I'll be introducing some techniques that crocheters use very often. So these include slip knots, magic circles, fastening off, weaving in ends, starting a new row, and color changing, and also if they have any designated abbreviations for when you're reading patterns. Number 1, a slip knot. Normally it doesn't have an abbreviation, but it's one of the first techniques that you need to learn in order to actually start your crochet project. This is essentially where you build your chains from, so it goes in a linear pattern, and usually chains are required to build upon your foundation into a specific size. So these kinds of projects will go in a linear pattern and then they go up by rows. For the purposes of this demonstration, I'll be using a size 4 acrylic yarn. Now, to make a slip knot, you just hold your yarn like so. This is how I do it, but obviously if you found a better way, then that's perfectly fine. My right hand is holding my 2 fingers like this. Just let it rest like that. And then your left hand will grab these 2 strands and then put this one over the one at the bottom. Again, Your left hand will twist so that this top one goes on top of the other yarn. Now these two fingers will go and grab this one, and then you pull and pull and pull until you have a slip knot. So this is how it should look like. And then you can adjust how big the hole is. So let's do it again. Hold your yarn like this. My right hand has two fingers holding the yarn. My left is holding on to the end and the other side. And then I just twist. These two will grab this yarn at the top and then just let it pull until you have a loop like this. And then you just hold this, keep it steady. I grab my hook and then just insert it. And then from here, you can adjust the hole to be bigger or smaller. In this case, we need it to be small. And that is how you do a slip knot. Number 2 is the magic circle. So this is also called a magic ring or a magic circle, and the abbreviations are MC or MR. If you need to work in a circle, which starts from a single point, and then you go outwards, that's when you need to use a magic ring. So anything like a bowl or like a plushie that's round, anything that's round that you need to start from a single point, you're going to need to know how to use a magic circle. Okay, so doing a magic ring is definitely more difficult than a slip knot, and a lot of people will have different ways of doing this. So I will just show you my way. Same thing, it starts off similar to a slip knot. So you hold it again the same manner, you twist again, and then when you grab this, instead of pulling all the way, you just pull until about right here, and then you'll be able to see that there's 2 different loops. This is the one that you pulled. Now you grab a crochet hook, you insert it into the top one. This is how it will look like once you let go. You chain 1 just to secure it, and then you flip. Oh, sorry. You flip the circle, and here is your magic circle. Now let's just do this again. So same as slip knot, you hold it like this. You twist. Your right hand grabs this part, and you only pull until you see that there are now 2 loops. Okay, now that you have 2 loops, hold it securely before grabbing your crochet hook, inserting it into the top loop, chaining 1 to secure it even more, and then you just flip this circle. Now, normally crocheters would say in a pattern like put 6 single crochets into the magic circle, and then you're supposed to tighten it after. So let me just show you how it would look like in action. So 3, 4, 5, and 6. And now you're supposed to tighten this. So you just grab the end, pull, and it should go very smoothly until you have a very tight circle. And there you have it. Number 3, starting a new row. So this is pretty straightforward. There's also no specific abbreviation for this. This is just something that you need to know in order for you to keep adding rows to your project. To start a new row, so as you can see, I already have 2 rows in. But this is, if your project is made up of single crochets, this is how you start a new row. So let me just finish off by adding my last single crochet. Now, in order to go to the top row and start a new row, you first chain 1, and then you flip your work. Once you flip your work, you can now start on the next row. This also goes for half double crochets. So single crochets and half double crochets, you will need to chain 1 before you go into the next row. Now, for the case of double crochets, you will need to chain 2. So as you can see, I just finished that row. I'm going to chain 2, flip my work, and now I can do my double crochets. This is just so that the heights of your rows will match the stitches that you are making, because double crochets are much taller than single and half double crochets. And then obviously for treble crochets, you will do 3 chains before you continue a row, so on and so forth. Number 4 is color changing. So not sure what the abbreviation for this either, but I've seen CC for color changing or contrasting color. I know that there are many ways and like tips and tricks and hacks of what the best way to change your color is in crochet, but for this video I will be showing you my way, but feel free to choose any other way that you feel most comfortable with and whatever works best for you. Okay, so for color changing, let's say I'm in the middle of doing my row, but the pattern states that I have to change my yarn into pink. So this is what I would do. First, this is a single crochet by the way, so first I would do my single crochet only halfway though. So I would insert, then yarn over and leave it at that. Okay, put it down. Then I will grab my new color. And then on this new color, we're going to make a slip knot. So hold your yarn like so, twist, and grab a new loop. So take your project, make sure it's not loosening up too much, right? Insert your hook into this, tighten it a little bit, and now you're going to insert this through these 2 loops that were already in your hook, and that's how you color change. Now I'm just going to continue, because now I'm holding onto the pink yarn and not the blue yarn anymore. You see? I'm going to show you how it looks like. So as you can see, it's a very clean color change and it feels very secure to me as well, because I made a slip knot for the pink. That's how the back looks like. And these will be dangling, so you're going to have to weave this into your project if you want it to keep it clean. Lastly is the fastening off and then weaving in the ends. Fastening off can be abbreviated to FO. So at the end of specific parts of your project, or at the end of your project overall, you're going to need to hide the tail of the yarn that you have just used. Okay, so let's say this was our finished product and now I have to fasten off and weave in my ends. The first thing I'm going to do is chain 1, and then I'll take my scissors and leave a long enough tail that you can use to sew. So about here is fine. And then notice that I did not move my hook, it is still on the loop. What I'm going to do now is pull up until all the yarn has been pulled through, and then tighten it. And this way your work will not unravel anymore because you tied a knot at the end. That's how you fasten off. And now we're going to weave in this tail. Now if you know how to sew, this should be pretty easy for you, but if you don't, then I'll show you how to do it. The goal is to be able to hide this yarn within this project. So you could look for like right here. I'm just going in between stitches wherever I can find an opening that is well hidden. See, you don't really see it from the other side. Okay, so once that's done, I just push my needle all the way through. Be careful not to tug too tightly. But we're not done yet. We have to go back the opposite direction, and that makes sure that it's totally secure and the end won't come out. Okay, so as you can see, I'm going the opposite direction, just finding areas that I can sew in. There you go. Straighten out your project and then cut this tail. And there you have it. Of course you have to do this other side as well, but that is basically how you fasten off and weave in your ends. For this this last section, I'll be going through the stitches and their abbreviations. I'm going to do my best to go slow so that it's easy for you to follow. Specifically, I'll be going through chains, slip stitches, single crochets, half double crochets, double crochets, treble crochets, front loop only, back loop only, and then an increase and a decrease. A chain is basically the foundation of crochet. It's what you do right after making a slip knot. So first, you're going to make a slip knot, which I've already demonstrated, but I'll just repeat it over here. Twist, grab, pull until you make a loop, hold it in place, grab your hook, insert it, and just go tighten it. Just a little bit loose, but close enough. Okay, in order to make a chain, you're going to just do a yarn over. So, insert your hook under and go up in order to grab, like so. You could also go this way. It's a little harder, but so I would advise to go under, hook, then pull until you make a chain. That is one chain. Again, yarn over, let it hook, pull, let it go through. Now you have 2. Now if a project asks you for 10 chains, you have 2, and you just do 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is what 10 chains looks like. It looks like a braid almost. It's like a V shape. So that's how you count your chains. And this is going to be the base of your work. And then you're going to continue making rows above this. Now, building up from this, we're going to learn the slip stitch. So, I'm going to go this way now. The slip stitch is the smallest stitch you can do apart from the chain. And I'll demonstrate it. Now, from the second loop, the second chain from the loop, this is the loop, you're going to count 1, 2. I'm going to start my slip stitch here. So, all you have to do is insert your hook through that chain, like so. Yarn over, let it hook, go through that first loop, and then go through this loop. So basically you've gone through 2 loops. Do it again. In order to make another slip stitch, you just find the next chain over, which is this one. Insert your hook, yarn over, and then pull once, and then pull again. That's 2 single crochets. I'm going to keep making single crochets up until the end of this row. Okay, this is my last one. And there you have it. That's 10 slip stitches on top of the chain that we just did. Okay, so now we're going to learn the single crochet. It's a tiny bit taller than the slip stitch. So we're going to do the same thing where we count 2 from the loop. So 1, 2, second chain from the loop. Insert our hook. Now you have 2 loops. Yarn over. Insert only on the first loop. Now you have 2 again. And instead of going and pushing this into the same loop, we're just going to yarn over again and go through both. And that's how you make a single crochet. Let me repeat. Go into the next stitch, insert hook, yarn over, and now you have 2 loops. Yarn over again, insert through both. That's another single crochet. And there you have it. That's our single crochet row. As you can tell, it's a slightly taller row than the slip stitch that we previously did. Okay, the next one is a half double crochet. Same thing as before, we're going to count the second chain from the loop right here. Now we're going to, before inserting our hook, we're going to yarn over first. And then we insert our hook. Okay, as you can see, make sure you have 3 loops there. Yarn over, pull it through the first loop only the first loop, and now you still have 3. And then yarn over and go through all 3 loops. That is your half double crochet. It's slightly taller than the single crochet. So as you can see, we're going in order of how big the stitches are. Okay, let me repeat. Before going into the next stitch, yarn over, insert hook, make sure there's 3, yarn over again, insert only on the first one, make sure there's 3, then go through all 3. There you go. So just yarn over, insert, okay, so this is my half double crochet row, and now we're gonna do double crochet. Okay, so we're back with our 10 chains. This time, instead of doing it on the second loop, second chain from the loop, we're gonna go to the third chain from the loop. This is because double crochets are much taller, so they need more space. Okay, so same as the half double, you're going to yarn over first, and then look for the third right here, and then you insert your hook. Okay, then you yarn over again, insert only through the first. You have 3, yarn over, and instead of going through all 3, you only do the first 2. Oh, there you go. Now you're left with 2 again. Yarn over and go through those 2. There you go. It's a pretty tall stitch. Let me demonstrate again. Yarn over, go to the next stitch. Yarn over. You have 3. Yarn over, go through the first 2, and then yarn over again on the last 2. Two again. That's the end of the double crochet row. So yeah, you can see they're taller, there's more gaps obviously. Okay, now we're going to do the treble crochet. So now that you notice the pattern, you know the treble crochet is going to be the tallest one yet. So instead of the first, second, third chain from the loop, we're going to go on the 4th chain from the loop. And now instead of yarning over just once, we're going to yarn over twice. So 1, and then another one, 2. And then we're going to insert onto that 4th chain from the loop. Yarn over. And now you have 4. You can see 4 loops. We're going to yarn over and go through just the first 2. Just the first 2. You're left with 3. Yarn over again. Just the first 2 again. And then lastly, yarn over, go through the last 2. So this is how tall a treble crochet is. Let me demonstrate again. Yarn over twice. Look for the next chain available. Insert yarn over once. Now you have 4. Yarn over the first 2, and the next 2, then the last 2. There you go. Okay, that's the end of our treble crochet row. Okay, so I'm just gonna go from here and start a next row in order to demonstrate the front loop only, or FLO. What that means is whatever stitch you're working on, let's say I'm doing a single crochet. If it says single crochet and then front loop only, what it's trying to say is you only go through this first loop. A normal single crochet would go through both loops, right? Both loops in the stitch. And you make a single crochet like so. Oh. So demonstrate again. Whenever you go through a stitch, there's always 2 loops right there. And essentially that's how you do a single crochet. If you want to do a front loop only, you take your hook and only go through the front. I'll show it this way. Oh, it's a little difficult. See these 2? Only going through very front. Uh-oh. Like so. There's only one there. Let me demonstrate again. And this next one, just the front, not the back. Now, to demonstrate the back loop, it's basically the opposite. Instead of going through the front, you go look for the back loop, which is this one. You kind of go in the middle, grab the back loop, make your stitch. Look for it. Right there. Grab your stitch. There you go. Okay, the last 2 that we're going to demonstrate is an increase and a decrease. What that means is when it says make an increase, it means you put 2 stitches into one. So if we're working with single crochet, it says increase, you put 2 into this one stitch. You don't go into the next one. You stay here and add another one. That helps to build up your work so that the next row will have more stitches, so it gets a little bit wider. That's why you do the increases. Do another increase. So go into this stitch, and again on the same stitch, make another single crochet. So now you basically just doubled the amount of stitches that you have. Okay, the next one is a decrease. It's a little more complicated because what you're trying to do is combine these 2 stitches into one. Essentially, it's the opposite of an increase. So what you do is insert, do the first one, yarn over, as if you're going to complete a single crochet, but instead of doing that, you grab the next stitch. So you insert your hook, the next stitch, yarn over again. Now you have 3. Now yarn over and go through all 3. So what you did was these 2 stitches, combine them into just one. So now what the decrease does is it shrinks your project to a specific point. Let's do another decrease. Insert, yarn over, insert again, onto the next one, yarn over, and then yarn over all 3. And that's it. Okay, so now that you know the abbreviations to stitches, the different techniques, and now you also know how to do them, reading a pattern will now be less overwhelming and so much easier. Once you watch those crochet tutorials on TikTok and on Instagram again, you'll have a much easier time trying to understand them. So to test you, here is an example of a pattern that I made. You can purchase my patterns in my Etsy shop, and I'll put the link to that down below in the description. But as you can see, it's pretty easy to understand. R just means row. So here we are at row 18 to 19, which is asking you to SC, which is single crochet all around. And then you slip stitch into the first single crochet, and then you chain 1. And the number at the end just means you should have 30 stitches at the end of the row. Now if you move on to row 20, it's asking you to do 3 single crochets and then a decrease in parentheses, and it's asking you to do it 6 times. So once you do that 6 times, you should have 24 stitches overall. Same goes for row 21, where it's 2 single crochets, decrease, repeat that again, 2 single crochets, decrease, until you repeated it 6 times, and then you should end up with 18 stitches overall. So That's it for the video. I really hope that it was helpful for those who are trying to get into crochet. I do have plenty of patterns and tutorials both on my YouTube channel and in my Etsy shop, so please check them out. I also have an Instagram and a TikTok, which is @artisangc. And if you have any questions, please comment them down below and I'll do my best to respond to them. See you guys in the next video.